Good morning, or evening. Welcome to Skye Sweaty Record Review, episode 23-ish? I don't know. The only new music record review show hosted by a French professor immediately after getting off an elliptical at the YMCA. I only record music that's come out this week, and I only listen to it once. Now, I realized during this show I'm going to make a lot of lofty proclamations. I had sort of a lot of, what I consider to be big thoughts. And I know I come across as arrogant, so I just want to let you know that sometimes I am the stupidest person I don't know who you've ever met. Maybe you've met some dumb people. But I was getting ready, and I got out of the car, and I was listening. I was trying to get my songs going, and I was listening through, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to review. And I was like, my headphones are broken. I don't hear it right. It doesn't make sense. These stupid, expensive Apple headphones don't work. And then halfway through the first record I'm going to review, I realized I had them in the wrong ear. So keep that in mind if you ever think I sound smart. Now, this is going to be another episode where I review two records at once. And I want to talk a little bit about my selection process, which is not scientific. It works like this, okay? I on my way to the gym, I'll open up Tidal, the music streaming service that I like and support, and you'd think I would advertise, but I don't. I just like them. And I go through the new records. And if there's something that I know that I want to review, then that's easy. But if there isn't, I have to go on a couple of factors. Like, if it's a name that I've heard, but I don't really know what they do, like the Ting Tings, I'll review that. If it's somebody who I like, but don't really know that well, like Lil Wayne, I'll do that. Other than that, I basically have to go through and sort of like in the old days when you'd go to a record store and you'd have or a CD store, and you'd have like those little listening stations with the fittingly broken headphones all the time, and you'd put them on and you'd press play on one of the 6 options that you had, and you'd kind of skip through the tracks to hear like the first 10 seconds and maybe skip to the middle of one of the tracks. That's what I do. I go to a virtual CD listening stand and I listen to albums, and I usually try to, if they have an interesting name, that'll give a listen, or if they have a good cover, I'll give a listen. But that's basically how I do it. And this week has been tough. There hasn't really been anything that clear that I want to listen to. But what happens is sometimes I hear connections between two artists. And I don't think the connections are intentional, and I think they're actually random just by what week they decided to release music. But I then think it's fun to try to develop the connection between them. So that's what happened today. I got a hunch that these two artists, Segall, and Cookin on 3 Burners would somehow have a narrative arc between them. And I found it. And again, if this ever sounds smart, remember, headphones. Okay. I think if you could summarize what this channel has been about, beyond just a new music show, is it's kind of a guy in his early 40s struggling with aging and music and trying to figure out like how he can stay limber and listen to new music and be open to it. It's my struggle with that. It's also my struggle with where is the mic, where is the camera. Okay, got it. Those are the 2 basic struggles of Skye Sweaty Record Review. And I think a lot about this because, my demographic, I'm in my early 40s, and I notice when music is made, it's trying to make, and when it makes me comfortable. When I hear something and I say, I grew up listening to classic rock and what I believe will be a new genre in the next 2 years, classic alternative. That's what I grew up listening to, guitars, kind of masculine energy, clarity, not too much keyboards, not too much effects, but just good classic rock and roll music. And I hear that and I feel comforted. And I know that's for my demographic. The best example, I've mentioned this before, is the Black Keys. Like you hear them and you go, now this is music. You feel comfortable. This has spawned a whole genre of imitators, and if you pay attention to commercials, you'll hear them all the time. If a commercial is aimed at men, like if it's for Ford F-150 trucks or Budweiser with Jim Beam in it, they have this, what I call beer commercial blues rock. Just this generic Black Keys imitation music that's designed to make men like me at my age comfortable. And that's the main thing that I really want to try to push against. Because when you get older, it's things like whatever, Justin Bieber or One Direction or whatever, random rap song, Cardi B. It's not that challenging because it's so far from what I grew up liking and listening. But things like Imagine Dragons or 21 Pilots are actually very challenging because they're pop rock, they're what a lot of young people are listening to, but I hear it and I just go, bah. Need a bunch of whiny, girly singers making music for girls. Rah. Like that. Like that's my initial reaction to that music. So I'm trying to push myself, but I fear being too much of a contrarian. Because obviously the Black Keys are great. They are one of the best acts out there. All of that is a long way to say I'm going to be talking about two groups today that make me comfortable, that go to that zone, that are retro rock. The first of which is Ty Segall. Segall? I don't know. Segall. And his amazingly titled album, Fudge Sandwich. Great title, great cover. It's just white bread with fudge in the middle. And it's a covers album, so it's doubly comfortable. I don't have to think about new music being written. And the actual recording, there's very little, there's no automated music. There is a keyboard, but it's not, I don't even think, a synthesizer. And it's this covers album, and it ended up being really nice, really interesting. I think that when you listen to cover albums, you can sort of divide covers, I would say, into three different categories of cover album. One, I would say, is just rote repetition, where you barely change anything, where you keep the nature of the cover basically intact. On this album, I would say the best example of that is Isolation, his cover of the John Lennon song. I mean, it's great. This guy can really sing. It's a little bit different, but not really. Then I would say there's kind of a stylistic transformation. I would say that this whole album has kind of a Kinksy T-Rex feeling. And that makes it sound really good. And I would say it deserves that kind of comparison. An example of that would be something like a cover of The Loner by Neil Young. I love Neil Young. He's a great example of somebody who managed to not get old. And it's a cover that is through this artist's style, but is not completely out of left field. I actually don't like that Neil Young song that much, so this may be my preferred version of that. In a similar way, he covered Saint Stephen by the Grateful Dead, which is a great tune, but can be a little bit annoying listening to early Grateful Dead. So I would really advise that if you like that song. I mean, it's really a great cover. And then there's the most interesting kind of cover, the deconstruction. The best example of that, I would say, is Devo's Satisfaction. Just you take the song, you take its elements, and then you just deconstruct it and make it into something different. And that's what he does with the first track, Lowrider. So he covers the song Lowrider by War. Ding, 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 ding. The very catchy song, but he completely deconstructs it. There's no hook. He took out that hook, that horn hook. He emphasizes the low, menacing singing of the original, the low rider, but he just completely exaggerates it. There's no high singing like in the original, and the cowbell rhythms are actually more complicated. You have the sense he's having a lot of fun playing this interesting cowbell. And then he adds these wild synthesizers in there that makes the whole thing sound like a soundtrack to a Dario Argento movie. And which, by the way, I'm not going to be covering Tom York's album of a soundtrack of a remake of a Dario Argento movie, because that just sounds bad. But I don't know, maybe it's good. This is a good Dario Argento cover, I would say. And it's a great cover of Lowrider by War. On the whole, I love this album. I really enjoyed it. It's very comforting. It's easy to listen to. He's a great singer. He's nasally with range. And I believe he's playing every single instrument on the album, which is, I used to make music like that. Not well, but I used to. And so I really kind of enjoy that. And then quickly, super quickly. It's going along anyways. The other group that I listened to that made me feel that way, this comforting feeling, was Cookin on 3 Burners. Lab Experiments Part 2. A lot of words in there. They're like a Melbourne trio who, like, they sort of alternate between Booker T and the MGs and the Meters. But they don't write quite as interesting melodies as Booker T, and they aren't as tight and funky as the Meters. But, I mean, no one can do that. So that's not exactly damning them. Every once in a while they have a singer who joins in and it feels kind of Winehousey, Amy Winehousey, kind of like, yeah, this is old 60s soul and music and it's great. And who cares if it's made by 3 white guys from Melbourne in 2018? And that's sort of the question, like, what do we do? Al Green stopped making Al Green music that we like 50 years ago. Do we just let these genres die? Well, I don't think we have to. There's enough musicians out there so that if that sounds interesting to you, some people could listen to this album and say, well, this is great background music. Like, hey, this is the best wedding band I've heard in a long time. Or you could hear it and say, finally, somebody's trying to recapture this spirit and they're doing it with success. I could say you could make both arguments about Cookin on 3 Burners. They do have one track called Howler. It's almost Halloween, so I would listen to that. That actually gets my Skye stamp. It's an instrumental track. It's got this amazing, really punchy beginning. Dunk, 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 dunk. You got to hear it. I'm not doing it justice at all. And I would also say that Lowrider and The Loner by Ty Segall get my stamp. So 3 stamps today, for whatever that's worth. So, on the whole, I would say that this is comforting retro rock. And I guess I'll have to add in parentheses, as I like to do, in a good way, because it really is. So, there's Skye's Sweaty Record Review. I am looking forward to Halloween. Oh, the question that I might ask, it's House of Guitars here in Rochester. Last the Mohicans. There are no more stores like that in the world. Okay, until the next album review, show, recording.